swear upon my oath
that I will uphold
that I will uphold
the Constitution
the Constitution
of the United States of
of the
America
United States of
and
America
the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of New
of the
Jersey,
State of New Jersey,
and I will further
and I will further
administer
administer
the Municipal Land Use Act
the Municipal Land Use Act
of the State of New
of the
Jersey
State of New Jersey
and the ordinances
and the ordinances
of the Township of Belleville,
of the Township of Belleville,
including the site plan ordinance,
including the site plan ordinance,
impartially,
impartially,
objectively,
objectively,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
I'll get out of your way now, sir. Thanks, man. Yeah.
Remember the other night? Where's Alex? Where's this?
Thanks.
So you and Don are now buddies. I love it.
Hey, pal. Hey. Wow, boy, that's it. A lot of people.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Squeeze right in there. You can kick the bag over.
Don't worry.
The meeting is called to order. Let's just stand for flag salute.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lois, can you read the statement of certification of the meeting?
Certification of the meeting has been advertised according to Sunshine Law.
Please call the roll.
Mr. De Niro,
Here.
Mayor Kimball, Mrs. Alvarado, Councilman Kennedy.
Here.
Mr. Conti.
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mrs. Shaw. Here. Mr. Bowe. Ms. Reno.
Here.
Mr. Sinatra.
Here.
Mr. Corvo.
Here.
Mr. Howitz.
Here.
Mr. DiBiase.
Here.
Mr. Di Lorenzo.
Can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of the November 9th, 2017 meeting and also the approval of the dates for the calendar year 2018 planning board meetings?
Make a motion.
Second. Lois, call the roll.
Mr. De Niro.
you get the dates? Second Thursday. We're going to pass it to the January meeting, because they said that the minutes weren't included in our packet. What do you think? So we'll just vote on the calendar year 2018 planning board meetings.
I just do the extra minutes if I.
Make a motion to move the dates.
Second motion.
Why don't you say this is a transcript, which can be, only going to vote for it enough.
Well, I wasn't here, Arlene left early and the other lady wasn't here, so what's the big deal on voting?
Well, she's just concerned that she didn't get it in her packet. Just want to clarify it. That's all.
What?
We'll move the minutes to next month. And we're just going to vote on a calendar year board meeting for next year.
Mr. Nero.
Yes.
Councilman Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Conti.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw. Yes. Mr. Corvo.
Yes.
Mr. Bo.
Yes.
Mr. Sanabria.
Yes.
Ms. Rico. Yes.
Chairman's comments. I just want to bring to the members' attention, any new members need to be certified. And if they look on their New Jersey planner that was in their packet, they can probably go on the website or look through here and see when the next meeting would be that they can be certified. Correspondence and payment of bills. Anybody have any questions or comments? Under old business, we have memorialized PB 2017-07, 212-216 Belmont Avenue.
Yeah, point of order. I wasn't here for that. Belleville Avenue last month, I was sick. And I was going over the resolution. And there's, first of all, I live on Hornblower Avenue, right near Belleville Avenue. And it takes me an average at about 6:30 in the afternoon to take 3 traffic lights before I get to Union Avenue and Belleville Avenue. But my number 4 says the applicant shall provide individual access to the driveway during the times when the school children are present to ensure safe utilization of the access to the driveway. So who are the kids going to listen to, this guy or the crossing guards? That's one of my problems with this. Then they're going to put up a sign, caution, children crossing. Well, we know what good signs are. And then the hours of operation is from 5 a.m. to 12, 7 days a week, fine. But what really tickled my passion was, the last parking space on the north side of Union Avenue shall be limited to employee parking only. Are they going to like stack their cars on top of each other? You know, where are the other employees going to park? And the other one, number 9, Belleville Avenue driveway will be limited to vehicle ingress only. Well, if you ever went to the 7-Eleven up in Bloomfield, they go in and out that driveway when they're only supposed to be going one way. And I'm just, you know, there's nothing I can do about it now because it's already been said, it's been approved, unless somebody appeals it. But I think this is going to be a disaster, especially when children are coming home, coming back and forth to school. You're going to have people going southbound on Union Avenue trying to make a left in this place. You're going to have people going northbound on Union Avenue trying to make a left into this place. You know, and what are you going to do? I mean, unless, you can't just have one employee there, because if he has to go out and help the children, he's going to leave the store after he's going to get robbed blind. So,
The employee, the space for the employees was because you have to back out of the lot to get out of that space, and we didn't want customers backing out of there, so we designated employee only so that it isn't coming and going all day.
That's fine, but where are the other employees going to park? On Union Avenue?
I said typically a lot of the employees don't have cars.
Oh, okay.
People that work in 7-Elevens.
I just, all right, I just want to say that.
Okay.
We're gonna hold this at the end of the resolution.
We're gonna hold the vote to the end of the meeting on that one. The next thing we have is the public hearing on an updated master plan and amended zoning ordinance.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board, and members of the public. My name is Don Mizell. I'm a planner for CMP Associates. We're a planning firm.
And to swear to tell the truth and all the truth, nothing but the truth, and help you God?
I wish. I also brought with me a colleague, Malvika Apte. She is a licensed planner and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. And she is an expert in municipal land use law, amongst other things, where I tend to focus on redevelopment and transit villages. Hey, Anthony, nice to see you. Before I start formally, I did make some boards. I realize they're a little too small for you all to see. I'll be referencing most of the material that's up here. Just wanted to give a brief summary. If you haven't been to the library, you need to go and pick up this book. It is fascinating. I learned more about Belleville in the half hour that I spent reading this. It's the 150th anniversary brochure. But to the point of the master plan, back in 2009, your master plan was updated. And since that time, the population in Belleville has grown by about 287 people all told. That would be in 2016. The total that I'm referring to is 36,203 people. At the same time, 2010, the school-age population in Belleville was 4,505 people. You've lost 54 students over the past 6 years, so the school-age population has stabilized as well. People living in your community now, about 13% are over 65. School-age children, 5 to 17, around 14%. And the biggest age group, if you cluster the numbers, 35 to 40, 54, it's about 30%. So that's just a very small snapshot of who's living here. What I'm here to do tonight is to update, or present an update to the master plan that exists. And basically, the master plan serves as a policy guide for this board, as well as council, to make decisions, primarily land use decisions. So that is what this document contains, is recommendations on how to proceed in the future. So this is called a re-exam because, again, you have the foundation of a master plan already in place. Our professionals have looked at it and made recommendations in conjunction with the planning board, with Mr. DiLorenzo, who's a wealth of knowledge, and others to come up with the recommendations that we've made in this document. So what we're supposed to do is talk about the changes that have happened since 2009, which we will do. And to that extent of updating, we have some recommendations that this board will consider, as well as City Council will consider, to make amendments to effectuate what is recommended in the plan. So one of our jobs was to identify problems that were identified in the last re-exam. And there's really one reoccurring theme, and that's Washington Avenue. Washington Avenue continues to struggle for various reasons, but the narrative in different places talks about I'll quote directly from our report, proliferation of marginal low-value retailers and the lack of adequate off-street parking. So, as a way to hopefully amend that situation and make it better, we are proposing that the entire street be rezoned. And again, I'm sure you'll have comments on that tonight, to the BG mixed-use district. The critical thing there is that the density for the proposed zone is 50 units per acre. Now, that sounds like a lot, but one of the objectives in the plan is to get more people living here, allow higher densities in specific areas that can handle that type of population. The idea is you already have water, you already have sewer, you have a school infrastructure, you have many things ready so that you can create more density in the town without going to a greater expense. We also talk about redevelopment opportunities in the plan. I think the prime example is the La Roche property. We've had a public hearing on it the last several months. There is redevelopment occurring on site. Currently, there is a storage facility and a pharmacy that's been proposed. Another site we'll be talking about tonight is the Belmont Avenue redevelopment area, which is the area commonly known as the old or former Pathmark. It's about a 9.5 acre site. There is and development anticipated for that site as well. And there are other areas around the town that also could stand from redevelopment activities, notably the Walter Kidda site, which is a 20-some acre site in town that the planning board has actually made a recommendation previously to declare an area in need of redevelopment. Hasn't moved forward. The recommendation in our plan is that they consider doing it again because it is a very large tract. I will tell you, I had many calls with Mr. DiLorenzo. I tried to come up with bulk criteria for that site, and I just couldn't do it. So again, the recommendation is to look at it as a redevelopment zone, come up with its own criteria, and to move that property forward. We also talk about transit-oriented development, and really we're talking about the Silver Lake Light Rail Station. Again, that's right next to the project we're talking about, the Belmont Avenue redevelopment area. It's a project that has a lot of promise. There's certainly environmental concerns about that site, and I assure you that all of those concerns have to be remedied before any development can proceed. So that's the underlying fact about that particular property. Let's see. So here's some specific recommendations that we give in the master plan. One of the more popular ones, I think, is to create an open space zoning district. So several parcels, Hendricks Field, Belleville Park, Branch Brook Park, they have a different zoning classification. Now we're recommending that an open space zone classification be put for your open spaces, which makes sense. Again, I mentioned this rezoning proposal, the existing BB and General Business District, part of it, I guess, is BC also, that Washington Avenue be rezoned completely. Again, allowing for higher density is the key issue there. There are several other parcels that are just good planning, cluster parcels that should be rezoned for either single family or multifamily uses. You currently have a zoning district called the Mixed Use Development District, which is the zone, I think, for the Kidda site. But it has no practical application, so the recommendation is that you get rid of it. Mentioned the redevelopment opportunities. And then, again, in line with keeping to try and make Belleville a better place, we have some code changes that we recommended as part of our obligations to the board and the council. Things as easy as raising the fee for an application to $100, moving some setbacks around, establishing a minimum height for detached garages. That's basically, again, I'm trying to keep this concise as I can. I should mention the strengths and weaknesses that are identified in the report, and these have been identified previously. The strengths of Belleville, in our opinion, proximity to New York City, and Newark for that matter. A lot of employment opportunities, transportation. It's a commercial hub. It's part of a commercial hub, which is the greater New York City area. You have exceptional parks and open space. It is, I think it's about a mile of open space when you add all the open space and parks together that you have in your town, which again acts as a restriction when you want to expand and grow. But at the same time, you have excellent regional access for Garden State Parkway, Route 7, 21, 3. Airport is right down the road, about 20 minutes away. Weaknesses that were identified, the building stock is aging. Quoting directly, the Washington Avenue corridor exhibits elements of disconnect and is fragmented. Again, the zoning change that's proposed hopefully will help alleviate that. And the final one is limited public transportation opportunities and direct access to New York. You have to take a bus if you want to sit down one time and get in the city. If you use light rail, you have at least 2 stops that you have to take. And if you've ever ridden mass transit like I have, you don't want to get up and down more than once. It's about the most you'll do. So that acts as a drawback in some cases. I gave you a little bit about the population makeup of Belleville. Again, we're encouraging higher density. The concept of complete streets is also proposed. Complete streets, in lay terms, is you make your roads compatible for things other than vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians. Make it safer, make it connect in a way that's less dangerous to the people who are using those roads. Again, that's a lot of information. I think I've touched on the highlights. I'd be glad to answer any questions. You've had this report for a while now, the planning board members. If you have any questions that you came upon in reviewing, I'd be glad to try and answer them.
Sir, for the record, within the framework of sound planning principles, would you render an opinion that the report you're giving to this board will improve the master plan for the township of Belleville?
There's no question, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Any members have any questions? Sure.
Tom, concerning your letter of October 12th, page 3, the first full bullet point, could you explain, it says the reasoning, or the rezoning in township parks and open spaces from the RA2 single-family residential zone to the newly established open space zone?
The newly established open space zone hasn't happened yet, but rather than classifying them as residential areas, we created a zoning district that deals.
You're saying that our current parks are in single-family residential
Some of them
zones?
are, yes. Cemeteries often get classified as residential districts. I can't offhand think of, but yeah. Again, there's no really good zoning right now that works for the town. That's why we're recommending it. This map here, which I brought, is what the zoning map would look like. Right now you have one that looks like this, so you're certainly welcome to come and see where the changes might be. I believe those large blue areas are the open space zone that we're proposing. Again, it's a lot of material, but again, I have a map of what it looks like now and what the proposed zoning would look like if you approve what is for you.
I can't see that, but what is the width of the Washington Avenue corridor?
The width?
One block on each side, 2 blocks?
I'd say that's safe to say, 1 block on each side. So it's the purple, goes from top to bottom. So it does get pretty wide at some locations. You have some zoning over here that's not along the corridor, it's the same.
I'm just saying, all the money was spent, we couldn't get bigger maps made or.
Well, these are
maps
pretty
made
big
for-
if you.
Well, yeah, they're pretty big, you know, if you have 20/20 eyesight and a magnifying glass.
Well, to be honest, sir, we just got the files that we needed to make this map yesterday. So we made the map so we could present it to you this evening. Certainly, you'd be glad to send you one that you can read and blow up.
If you're gonna send me one of the maps like you did send me the master plan, I'm still waiting for it.
Yeah. Does any other members of our board have questions of this witness?
Just have, by our being able to designate those areas, which are already open space, as part of our required calculation for open space. Now, I hope we're required, as Belleville is required, to have a certain percentage of space. Originally, we didn't have that open space because we didn't include those areas. Am I asking the right?
I'm not sure of the history. Certainly, you have what's called a Rossi, an inventory of all your open spaces.
I think what you're talking about is municipal-owned parks,
Correct.
which it was to include
Yes.
municipal and
So,
county.
right, and therefore, we would be in a better position to fulfill our obligation of having open space if we do that calculation.
Yeah, but it also preserves it, the zoning also preserves it as open space.
Yeah, so it's a positive
Yes.
environmental.
Yes.
What consideration has been taken into our COA obligation?
As of now, your obligation is acceptable to COA. The future obligation hasn't been determined yet, but
Yeah,
you are in good standing.
900 units.
I'm sorry?
They want like 900 units.
I haven't seen how much they want. I know that in our report, we talk about 162 units.
And like number 11, the former Essex County Geriatrics Hospital site should be reviewed as to the future land use with potential of redevelopment.
That's from 2009.
Oh, all right, because they're redeveloping.
So again, we're taking the items from 2009, we state the status of them, and then we make recommendations for, new recommendations for a lot of the same things and add our own as well.
One more question about that Soho Hospital property. Is the Grade 1 considered open space?
I believe so, isn't it?
The Grade 1's in the RDB zone, and yes, it's considered, the only permissible use is open space.
And that will be put in this new open space zone?
Is that your recommendation on it?
It's on the net.
Here it is here. It's in the RDB zone.
So it would not change from the RDB zone that it's currently located.
Commissioner's question, do we fulfill the obligation for open space with this plan?
Fulfill the obligation for open space.
Here's a response. I don't know if mine, yeah, they, and we were far below.
Have we ever mandated to create this?
I think their recommendation.
Yes.
If I may, the open space is based on the national
We have to
parks.
swear you, please.
We need to.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
State your name again for the record.
Malvika Apte, MALVIKA, ABT.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, the open space and recreation standards are industry-wise, they are statewide standards, and it's more as a guide for each town to follow. And what with this plan we are recommending is to preserve the open space, because we all know open space is needed for the betterment of the population and the society. So it's more of a guide. There is no mandate, but of course, you are required to have some open space.
The reason I asked, was just confirming it, was because of NJSA 40:55B, which it states that we must take into consideration as we develop the other considerations of environmental conservation. So
Sure.
that's the reason.
Sure, yes, definitely. I mean, the goal is to provide different kind of land uses, but I just wanted to clarify there is no mandate.
To that point, you have several large areas that are redevelopment opportunities, and within those areas, you have the opportunity to create more open space. When you make the plans, like we're going to present later today, and plans in the future, you can mandate open space be created.
Would you have a number for percentage that we do hit in maximizing what we have now compared to what the state suggests? What percentage are we at with the new plan of open space?
I mean, in terms of open space, because you have the county park system, it's a tremendous, it's a big number. But in terms of what you want, in terms of your population, how does that get calculated?
I think what if I'm not, I think it's 3%, I'm not, please don't quote me on that. But also the requirement is 9.6 acres per 1,000 residents.
So where would we be on that? The reason I ask is I own a building in a town that has massive parks all around it. And somehow in their wisdom, they decided to buy out a development that was about to be built, spend millions of dollars because they wanted to create more open space. And Are we forced into that? Is it arbitrary? Is it voluntarily? Is it voluntary? And do we already have enough so that if the township, 20 years, 10 years, however long down the road decides to move for open space, is there an argument that we need it? Or is it an argument that we already have it? And then we start with all these little pocket parks all over town spending,
I think
hundreds
it's
of
an argument
thousands
you
of
have to
dollars.
decide, because you're in a unique situation where you have all that county park land. The number that she just gave you, you don't have enough open space if you take that
Right, if you took
multiplier
our number, right.
and turn that number. You Belleville,
How close would you say we are when you take the county parks? Just out of my
you would exceed,
We would exceed the county.
I would say.
So we could argue in the future that we already have more than enough open space.
Yeah, maybe you could inventory.
Yeah,
But-
but we're there. It's not like, I was wondering out loud, do we have 30% of what the state mandates, or 50%? You're saying we have probably more than the state mandates, or suggests.
I mean, it suggests, it's a guideline.
Today they suggest.
But again, the opportunity for open space, as per our report, comes with your redevelopment areas and creating new space. So Roach property is a really great example because the old Morris Canal borders that property. And I understand that there are cars parking on it, people use it to do this and that, the other, but it's an opportunity that you have when they come back with a site plan and say, hey, you've been given this, we've approved this, now we want some open space dedicated for our residents. So that is a recommendation in the master plan.
Any other board members have questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add, for the record, my name is Dean Donatelli. I'm a Special Redevelopment Counsel for the Township. I work with the council on the redevelopment plans in particular. I just wanted to kind of address we're also working with the council on affordable housing and addressing the town's needs. I don't think I need to be sworn. I just want to add, to address the councilman's point. The township does have an obligation for affordable housing. Just to clarify, it's a rehabilitation obligation. It's not for new units. So the idea is from your affordable housing trust fund, you would allocate those funds to rehab existing housing stock, which is consistent with the points raised in the proposed master plan.
And what's the total?
162.
162,
To date,
that's all?
and my office is working with Fair Share Housing and the Special Master in order to reach a settlement, which would confirm and document that number and reach an agreement on how the town would go forward with those rehabilitation
Well,
units.
that number went down a hell of a lot from the last number I heard.
That's what it is today. And again,
162?
it's you've probably been following, the whole board's probably been following. Fair Share Housing is out there trying to encourage towns. There are two numbers. There's the Dr. Kinsey's numbers and the municipal numbers, which there's a big disparity between the two. So towns are going into before special master and reaching a settlement as to what a fair number is. So I just want to raise that point, and also I just want to clarify the board's all aware that the master plan is a guiding document, so any changes to the zoning ordinance, and some drafts have been prepared, any changes would be initiated at the governing body level, they'd be introduced, and then they'd be referred to this board for, consistency, review, and so on, so you can address the concerns in terms of open space, where it's located, and so on, and address the numbers specifically before it goes back to the governing body for codification. I just want to add those 2 points, and I'm available for any other questions.
Council, thank you for show up this evening. And if you would stay, because we are going to do Belmont Avenue under new business next,
Great.
your comments would be helpful when we're talking about consistency.
Will do. Thank you.
At this time, we'll open it up to the public. If you have any questions or comments? Mr. Frantantoni?
Mr. Frantantoni, or Commissioner, we're going to try to move this a little faster this evening because we have a long agenda. So we're going to swear everyone in, whether you're making comments, questions, you can put them all together. You can make comments and questions the first time you're up. So if you would be sworn in, we would appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. DiBiase, but in all due, this goes on every time. I don't know why you're trying, one of the things in this thing, we invite public participation.
Yeah.
Why you continuously try to short circuit these meetings and expedite it. If you got someplace to go, well, go. But don't try to
Would you please swear the
quiet
witness
us.
in, he can make comments and ask questions, and we're doing that for...
That's not the way you're supposed to ask questions first, comments are later when you get sworn in. Now, for all these years, you've been an attorney for you don't
That's the
understand
way
the
we want to
process.
do, Mr. Frantantoni.
Well, this happens every meeting, Mr. Chairman, and he's out of line when he's trying to silence the
I don't
public.
think he's out of line.
He does it every meeting.
Would you please swear the witness and let him ask questions and comments?
You don't need to be sworn in to ask questions.
Would you please swear the witness, please?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and address.
Richard Frantantoni, 129 Mount Prospect Avenue. As Mr. Mizell said, this is a lengthy document. I got it early, courtesy, he mailed it to us. And over the past month, I spent a lot of time, I know a few folks did it, reading every single page and conversing with other residents on this thing. And there's a lot of questions and comments I have on this. Number one, Mr. Mizell, you want to rezone all Washington Avenue to the BG district.
Correct.
I have no problem. It's uniform this way, it's all uniform. What I do have a problem is where you then go on further in the report recommending that it's 50 units per acre. I don't know if you know the present zoning on Washington Avenue. We already have 50 units in a BG district, already allowed as a conditional use. I recommend to this board you keep it as a conditional use, because there's certain things in there that our other board, the zoning board, should be allowed to decide what needs to be conditional. We already allow, without going to the zoning board, 34 units per acre, which I think is excessive, but you got it, and it's as Mr. Mizell said, we don't have direct transportation in New York at all. So those two things, I think that should be struck. We don't have to make it mandatory to allow 50 units per acre and all that. There's another item in there. He's recommending, which I don't think is in his purview to do so, that block 5401, lot 4, be rezoned from a single-family area to residential. This particular lot already came before a zoning board many years ago, and the zoning board rejected it. He wanted to build multifamily on the site. That site has a lot of problems with it, and rightfully so, the zoning board rejected that application to there. I suggest that's not included in the master plan. Leave that up to the zoning board. Mr. Mizell is showing it. It's a little lot in the middle of a 1- and 2-family zone. If you folks would see it in there, and it don't belong classified as multifamily to destroy that neighborhood. In regards to the Belmont Avenue site, as I said, it's contaminated property. I have no problem, an area in need of redevelopment. But as some of you board members said, I think Ms. Short explicitly, we don't want to see residential there. By the way, there's more articles, I brought up some in the paper, that this rental market, it's a bubble about to burst any minute now. We've overbuilt not only in New Jersey, particularly, but all over the country. So be careful with that. On Belmont Avenue, I see no reason for declaring the east side. That's only going to open up a lot of litigation, a lot of court for the township. The east side of Belmont Avenue is all residential. People own properties along there. Why we're going to declare that an area, a redevelopment area? We're only going to harm our existing citizens. In regards to the redevelopment plan for Franklin Avenue near the Nutley border. This is a gentleman who owns 3 properties, 2 on Franklin and 1 on Hilton, and they're all attached. He don't live in Belleville, he lives in Wellington, Florida. Their properties, I have the taxes, they're on the tax roll, they're paying taxes. If he wants a development, whatever, let him go through the proper channels. Let's not declare an area need to redevelop. There's no reason to it. There's a gas station there, the other property is a two-family house, they're presently being used for what they're zoned for. Let's not give a gift to this guy from Florida and declare an area need to redevelop. Number one, every time you do that, the neighborhood change, because you got something, I wouldn't want property next to mine called an area needs redevelopment. It diminishes the value of the property. In regards to the open space zone, I agree there's a lot of things we put in there, there's some things we should add. I don't know, I don't know if it's state law, if there's any law. I don't believe cemeteries should be qualified as open space law. I couldn't take my kids, and I certainly can't take my grandkids to play around there. So I don't think cemeteries should be included in our calculation. In regards to the Walter Kidder site, and that's, we always know that the Walter Kitty, they changed the thing. It's a non-condemnation area. We need something there. We don't want or need residential down there. And it was somewhere in the report, it says that there's no demand for commercial and residential. In just this past year, or maybe the last 9 months, in fact, it was just approved a truck terminal on Main Street and near Mill Street. There was right here in back of Valley Street, a company comes from Brooklyn, relocated here. They package and ship candies right in back of Valley Street. They were glad to come to Belleville. They were recommended by another friend of his who also set up a Jewish bakery on the north end of Belleville here, who also came from Brooklyn. The empty lot on the corner of Rutgers and Main Street, that was just approved. There's going to be a packing and a shipping warehouse over there. We've got things of it. We got across the street from School 1 on the south side of Rutgers Street, about 10, 12 years ago, it was approved for 38 or 40 units of housing. It was never built, and what do we get? We get commercial. The Parks Authority just opened up there about 6 months ago, and they want it there before the zoning board right now to expand to go retail. There is a demand for it because of our unique location, and these businesses and these commercial units are very valuable to Belleville because they don't require services. They're paying taxes, but they're not putting kids in the school system, we're not providing all the services that residential would need. So I ask you to look at that and consider that we don't need residential down there. And according to at the last couple of meetings, when I brought this up about commercial down there because of our location, with online buying now, these shipping companies are looking for more and more sites for it. And I was encouraged at the last council meeting that Mr. Kennedy, the mayor says, oh, I think it's on commercial, we might have good news on the Walter Kidder site. So let's stay away from residential down there. In regards to basement baths, the recommendation there to allow half or one bathroom in the basement of houses, but providing there's one emergency window egress and one room greater than 70 square feet. Well, if you look at your health department rules, a bedroom is required to have minimum 70,000 square feet for one person. And if you have access, a window with enough egress, well, what you're doing? You're legalizing a basement apartment. So that's something wrong. In fact, I've been yelling for years to put a warning in our tax bill about all these illegal apartments. One of our councilwomen has been stating for the past years, we have too many illegal apartments, and now they're supposedly, following what I've said, to put a warning in the tax bill that we're going to crack down on these if you're caught. Well, now they're supposed to put it in the next water bill. We'll see if that happens. But we don't want to do anything that would encourage or justify basement apartments. And by putting those two criteria there, one room greater than 70 square feet, which becomes a bedroom, an emergency window, which is the other law, you need for a bedroom, you need a window with 5.7 minimum square feet egress. We're saying, okay, put a basement apartment down there, or living quarters. The next thing on there is the parking for high rises. That I didn't understand, maybe Mr. Mizell could explain that. It said, do you want to accept Rice's standards on that?
Oh, residential site improvement standards? Basically, you have standards that the state has mandated that call for 10 by 20 parking spaces in most residential situations. What we're saying is we want more flexibility to not have to do 10 by 20 in certain residential situations. Redevelopment plans, we can designate what the parking is, but as a standard, that's the standard that's supposed to be met, and most of your ordinances in New Jersey don't meet that standard. So it's just trying to give us some flexibility on how we can define what a parking space is.
And what are your recommendations? To require less parking?
Less parking as far as a dimension? Or
No, fewer spots.
I mean, it certainly depends on the site and the use, but if you give me a specific, I'll give you a specific
Well,
answer.
again, the 2007, 2009 Met plan is severe. It's in your own report. Where we have a tremendous lack of parking.
If you're asking me
For
if there should be alternatives to the RSIS standards, yes, the answer is yes, you should have alternatives, and you should have the right to modify them based on the use for the property.
To use our ordinance, it requires 2 per unit. Our local ordinance requires 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit.
For each what?
Dwelling unit. No? Well,
It varies by zone.
Huh?
It varies by zone. What zone you're in will dictate how many spaces, how many bedrooms you have, that type of thing.
It's per dwelling.
It's 2 per dwelling across the board?
And residential.
Okay, pardon me, I'm in a different town, sorry.
Well, and again, we desperately need parking, and especially with the Washington corridor. I mean, I've got a residential property and a business on Washington Avenue, and both are hurting. The tenants can't park, as it is, and the business, we can't get customers here because of the lack of parking. And it's in the 2009 report and the 2007 report, and the town has done nothing over the years to acquire. That we have to do. There's also in the report, the last report, there remains a need for senior citizen housing. Somewhere in the report, we refer to the Mill and Franklin Street as senior housing. That, I want to set the record straight, that's not senior housing, that's age 55 restricted housing. So we still, in the town of Belleville, do not have one single senior citizen housing. So before we go to multifamily housing, let's concentrate and get some senior housing there. The other thing is they're talking about traffic bottlenecks at key intersections. One of the major ones is Union and Girolamo Street. We've recommended to do something there. Once again, it's 10 years. Our council has failed on doing that, and see, this is what we're concerned about. There's some things that require big, massive construction, big, massive amounts of money. I can understand that and appreciate it. It takes time to do things. But here we're talking about an intersection that doesn't need any construction. We're talking about striking the street and changing the signals to the proper timing to allow left turns lane. And here, our fathers, the Belleville governing body, and others, 10 years we can't get it done. And my wife fought for the light on Union and Holmes before we were told the county don't want to do it. After 6 years, she called the county. In a matter of months, we got the light put up. So I can't understand some of the things that we can't, why we're going to do other things when we can't accomplish what was proposed 10 years ago. I think that, the other thing is, you may mention that we have a lot of low-value retailers on Washington Avenue. Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's hard to put a definition on low-end retail or low-value retail, but your dollar store is typically associated with low-end retail. It's not specialty retail, it's not, as opposed to high-end retail where you would have specialty shops, more restaurants, more boutiques. Again, it's a very general phrase, but it's typically Dollar General, dollar stores, jewelry stores, some stores that only sell phones. Those tend to be classified as low-value retail.
Are you aware of the demographics of our town? You know, we're a blue-collar town. So while you may call them low-value retailers, the residents of our town, good men in them, need these things. These restaurants, I have a laundromat, you want a barber shop, you want your hair cut, we have nail salons.
That's not low-value retail.
Businesses.
We're talking about different types of retail and services.
Well, like Family Dollar and the Dollar Tree, which is always busy, you're talking them low value to who? To the governing body who wants to...
It's a phrase that's used to classify those types of businesses. It's not my phrase, I didn't invent it.
Okay, well, just to set the record straight, what somebody called low value retailers in a blue collar town, those are vital services that the people of this town needed. And if you look at them, those are the businesses that are packed all the time.
Again, the phrase we use in the redevelopment plan over and over and over is mixed use. Create more dwelling units and the businesses that will service those units will come. It's the only way you're going to get a better mix rather than what we call low value.
So, planning board members, just so you understand what these low value things are providing for the citizens of the town, and I think many of you avail yourself of them services too. In a blue collar town, we need that kind of stuff there. You're not going to get these, you know, Lord and Taylor to come into Belleville. So those are some of the things I've observed in there, and I hope you do the right thing for the citizens of Belleville and not for the wealthy developers that come in here. Thank you.
Please come forward and get sworn in.
Sure. Before I'm sworn in on this, may I make a point of order or ask a question? Sure. Okay. Am I to understand that under new business today, you're going to be introducing the Belmont Avenue project in this meeting?
We've already discussed the Belmont Avenue project, but special counsel will be addressing it at the next.
Just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'll be sworn.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I certainly do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Frank F. Fleischman III, 132 Franklin Street in Belleville. Thank you. Mr. Mozell, I see that, as Mr. Frank Antoni had mentioned, the update here asks to permit a density of 50 dwellings per unit, 50 dwelling units per acre for residential development in the BG district. Now, currently, it's 34 from all other standards. That's quite a bit. Would you agree?
No. I mean, if you break it down, the minimum lot size for the zone is 10,000 square feet. So if you have a quarter acre, you could conceivably build up to 11 or 12 units on that quarter of an acre. And the point I've made before is it's really hard to put 50 units on a 4-story building because once you go above 4 stories, the cost of building skyrockets and the cost to sell them would go up as well. So the practical application of this is allowing up to 50. Doesn't mean you have to build 50. And with the 4-story height restriction, to me that satisfies, and again, everything comes to the planning board relative to site plans for a project like this. So if someone was to put together an acre site, they would have the right to come forward with up to 50 units and present it to this board. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be a line at the door to build 50 units an acre in the BG zone, but to have the option, I believe, is a good sound planning principle.
Have you, obviously you've done a lot of these, have you ever proposed like jump like this in other municipalities?
I have. I worked in the city of Orange for almost 10 years. I created 3 different transit villages. They are used zoning for transit. In one case, we actually created unlimited density because again, you can only put, 40-some units in 4 stories to make it a feasible place. So again, it really depends on where you are. The standard for across the state is 45 units per acre around a train station. If you have a transit village designated, that's the number they use, so this is slightly higher. But again, it's an effort to create opportunity and to bring more commercial as well as more residential.
I happen to pass by those transit villages every day on my way to work, so I'm very familiar with them.
Just so you know, it took 10 years from the idea to where we have the transit village in Orange, and about 60 or 70 million dollars. So it's not something that happens overnight. If you do stay for the next presentation, a light rail transit village is going to be a little different, and we'll talk about that then if you have questions. Glad to answer.
Okay, thank you. Was it? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that, because you're saying about a light rail transit village for Belleville Avenue and so on. Okay. I'm pretty sure that I saw in the master plan that the township doesn't want to pursue that at this time.
What it says is it doesn't want to pursue transit village designation.
Okay.
Doesn't mean we don't want to pursue money for transit improvements, but the designation of a transit village itself is not recommended. It would take time, energy. It's not really a train station. I will have you know, tomorrow I'm going to Together North Jersey workshop on transit villages, and I'm going to ask them specifically to help us look at the Belmont Avenue site and get some direction and guidance there.
But you mentioned before that you have 3 transit villages that you've worked on for the city of Orange. Now that is a city designation, that's correct?
There's only one. The city of Orange, the Orange train station, the area around that is a designated village. What I did is the Highland Avenue train station is just down, it's the next station down. What we did is we used transit village zoning for the area around that station and made it a redevelopment area. So that's, then East Orange has a train station. It's one of the busier ones along the corridor. So we took what we could of the city limits in Orange and used transit village zoning for that area as well. So only one formal transit village that got funding. What we actually did is we received money and we used that money to put in wayfinding signs to help people navigate town library, train station, schools. I mean, that's the kind of reward we got for getting designated. It also opens you up for other funding possibilities when you're a designated village. But in this particular instance, at this particular time, it's not recommended to go for that formal designation.
So, like I said, in the city of Orange and the city of East Orange, you've had this sort of thing, am I correct?
Correct. And again, it's really just a zoning issue. It's giving us the flexibility to do a lot of different things.
Have you ever had something like that in a municipality, designated township, or a borough?
I have not worked on those per se, but I think there are over about 25 designated transit villages by the state. I don't think any are light rail at this juncture. But again, it's good. What they offer as part of the transit village, you can incorporate. You just don't have to be designated formally by the state.
Going back to what you said about, we're talking about the 50 units per acre, and you said it's hard to build that in 4 stories.
Correct.
Are you suggesting possibly the possibility of high rises being built on Washington Avenue?
Not at the present time, no.
Okay,
The height restriction would stay 4 stories for the plan.
But theoretically, that could be done if the township decided to.
Well, certainly, and again, down the road it could. What would be more likely is if you go more than 4 stories, you have to go to the zoning board of adjustment to get permission to do that. So that wouldn't be a planning board matter.
Concerning Belmont Avenue and the change in the zoning there. Okay, so on the western side, I see that it's basically, it's not a very big tract of land that is proposed to be designated the BG zone. Am I correct?
Well, it's basically all the properties that front the Belmont redevelopment area. That's what's shown on the map here. Here's the Belmont area site, and there's the street. So it covers about 3 blocks if you want to count every street that you encounter.
Because I live in that area, I've lived in that neighborhood for 20 years now, and from what I see on that particular side that we're speaking of, it's basically 2 or 3 houses. It's a car lot, and then you're starting to back up against the super fresh Old Pathmark property.
Right.
Does that sound about right?
It does. What you have here, this is for the next presentation,
Mhm.
but you have the uses that are already existing. So the different shades represent different uses that are already existing on that section that we're recommending you consider for the beaching zone. So it's not all single-family residential, but there's a lot of, like you said, you know the neighborhood better than I do, you know what's there. But there is some mixture of commercial or business uses along that strip. And again, it's simply a recommendation to consider.
And you also recommended that for the eastern side of Belmont Avenue as well, I believe. Yes. Am I correct?
Side of Belmont. Frank, can you help me with that?
Certainly.
No.
Oh,
It's all right.
couple of Franks in here.
Yeah. It's idea that I think the RC and they want it to.
Thank you.
So I guess my question would be to you, Mr. Mizell, is what would be the advantage of making that zone change in your opinion?
Well, again, if the development that's anticipated goes on at the Belmont area redevelopment site, there are going to be other, those developers don't own those properties. Those are still privately owned, and they can take advantage of that situation without detracting from their current environment.
So theoretically, this developer who wants to do the redevelopment now at the Pathmark site could possibly purchase those properties through whatever means, condemnation or whatever the case may be, and...
I certainly wouldn't use condemnation. At the free market, he certainly could. I don't think that's the intent, but what I did want to mention is at each station, there's 15,000 people living within 1 mile of each one of those stations. So you've got a lot of density, and again, the more mixed-use activity you can offer, I think is better for the neighborhood, and then to be able to regulate it. You don't want to have businesses that aren't approved moving in and taking over. You want to be able to regulate.
So the theory would be basically on something like this, you have higher density development, the free market will essentially bring in businesses that are walkable.
That is the idea behind the zoning, I would say, yes.
That's interesting because I've lived in that neighborhood 20 years, and there is a very, there's a business district there that has been floundering for that amount of time. And, I tend to question if this is actually going to make that any better, especially with the infrastructure that is there now. That is my next question. With your, in review with this, with this report, the report says that the town's infrastructure is aging. Okay? Do you feel that with the designations, with the possibility of high density residential development, that the current infrastructure would support that?
I think you're definitely going to need improvements to that infrastructure. What I can speak to specifically in your redevelopment areas, again, these bigger parcels we've identified, you can mandate that the developer make those improvements at no cost to the taxpayer. So that's the advantage there, is that you have these opportunities to fix the infrastructure that is lacking, and it doesn't do much in terms of capacity or whatever for the whole town. But you're right, it's aging, it needs to be fixed, but for these bigger projects, it offers a remedy that doesn't fall so hard on the taxpayer to pay for.
And correct me if I'm wrong, your company did do the report on the area needed redevelopment for the Belmont Avenue project.
Absolutely, and the plan for it as well.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
We're going to do Belmont next now, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and address.
Michael Sheldon, 47 Floyd Street. Just a few questions and comments. Mr. Conti, earlier in the evening you were asking about the recreational space currently in Belleville. According to the Essex County Open Space Master Plan, if any of you would like copies of it, I can send it to you. It's a pretty long document. It's 35 megabytes. It's about 300 pages. But according to that report, the target number for Belleville for recreational space should be about 300 acres. Our actual number, 24.53. And of that 24.53 acres, 15 of it is courtesy of the municipal stadium. So we have essentially no real useful recreational space in this township. So I just wanted to get those numbers out. I've noticed that in the current zoning ordinances, zoning map, all of our schools are in residential zones. And over the last week or so, I've been doing a fair amount of reading on the American Planning Association website. A lot of communities throughout the country have special zones designated for schools, monuments, historical land sites, etc. So while the zoning map is front and center, I'd like you to consider having our schools, and I'm now speaking as the newest member of the Belleville Board of Education as a trustee, but I think it would be wise to give all of our schools a special zone. After all, our schools belong to the Board of Education. They're not municipal property. They belong to and are controlled by the Board of Education. So it's something I'd like you to consider, creating a new zone so that all of the schools in Belleville, the 7 elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school, are put in their own special zone. I would ask you to consider that. Another thing I'd like to mention, part of the proposed changes to the master plan effectively would legalize basement apartments, and there's a number there given as 70 square feet, which would make it, quote, habitable space. Now, keeping in mind that I think that the average jail cell is 80 square feet, it's not, in my opinion, that's not really a livable amount of space. But even more importantly, if memory serves me correctly, Councilman Kennedy, just within the last year or two, spearheaded an ordinance to eliminate basement apartments. And it seems like this is kind of thumbing Kevin Kennedy, that you're trying to reverse what he took many years to implement in Belleville. I mean, that's my read of it. It seems like one of the revisions here would allow basement apartments to become approved.
Could you clear it up, Mr. Mizell? Because I don't think that was
If
the
I can
intention.
speak, yeah, the intent is not to encourage, it's to deter. Here's what it says. Establish standards permitting the installation of a half or full bath in the basement dwelling units, provided that the units have a door at grade, which they may or may not have, and/or an emergency window egress and at least one additional room, and apply with all applicable codes. So it was designed to make it harder for someone to put in dwelling units, but it may not be meeting that purpose.
But this is a matter of practicality. If you put a bathroom in the basement, almost invariably an apartment's going to follow. And it seems like instead of tightening up the restrictions against illegal basement apartments, this would have the opposite effect. This would actually make it easier for these things.
What about if we take out the emergency window egress and just talk about a door at grade? Wouldn't that make it a lot more difficult? You'd have to have a door.
No, eliminating the 7 square feet.
Again, it was an attempt to make it more difficult rather than to make it easier or encourage.
And it's something I think should be discussed a little bit more thoroughly before.
When it comes in front of the council.
All right. I am a bit concerned about the BG zone along Washington Avenue. I'm in favor of more uniformity, but in the same breath, I'm concerned about the 50-unit density. In particular, the added presence on Washington Avenue is going to have a direct impact on 3 of our elementary schools, number 3, number 8, and then number 9. Now, 2 of those schools are already essentially at capacity. If school number 8 is actually over capacity, putting any more residents along Washington Avenue in a grandiose way. I know the rhetoric from planners and architects is that the type of buildings they want to put into Belleville won't really contribute to the school population, but inevitably that never happens. As Mr. Frantantoni has cited case after case, local projects where developers promised there wouldn't be any school children. I think the case in point would be the Cambridge Heights project in Nutley. The developers there said no children would be there, and a few years later, there were 137 children from Cambridge Heights. Now,
I'd like to correct that record because I actually did that project. And the experts thought there were going to be 213 over a decade. They haven't hit that number yet, and the developer also put up $750,000 for expansion. So those are the facts on that case, but please continue.
Well, In any case, I'm concerned that by putting large numbers of people along the Washington Avenue corridor, we have to be really careful and cognizant of the impact that that additional population is going to have on schools 3, 8, and number 9. So I think that covers everything. All right, thank you for your time. Thank you.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and address.
Victor Mafucci, 61 Continental Avenue. Just a couple of things. Your second bullet point, block 504, lot 4, you have the address on it?
I don't know
You
off the top
listed
of my
something
head.
there that we don't have for the street.
I'm sorry?
It's 18 Princeton Town.
Yeah, you listed some.
18 Princeton, yeah, I have it.
Now, the water and gas right away is under that property.
I think Newark does. Newark Water has, I think, a right of way.
Yeah, but it's a reservoir. So I don't see how you could put RC multifamily residential. That's the zoning, we'd like to change it. I don't know if put anything. You have to forgive me, I forgot my glasses. Oh, as far as the open space zone, I like the idea in general, but I almost feel like there should be two different types of open space zone. One that you could do recreation on and one that you can't, such as the cemetery, the portion of the Forest Hill Golf Course. We can't use it. Also some properties that should be included on that list. Portland Park, William Street Park, Mary Lou Wood Park, William Field, definitely the Great Lawn, and did they officially name the Silver Lake thing after the councilman zoning?
Yeah, Soho property, that's Soho Park.
Yeah, but it's always.
Yeah, it was,
Okay,
Angela was only Soho Park.
okay. Definitely no on the full bathrooms in the basement. There's so many illegal basement apartments now. On the second page, the bullet point about permitting reconstruction of non-conforming two-family dwellings destroyed or damaged. I'm trying to figure out the definition of non-conforming. To be non-conforming for another number of reasons.
Certainly. And any of the reasons would probably be applicable. But the idea is to let the property owner rebuild on the site when they otherwise would not be allowed to, the way the current zoning is set up. It's designed to give someone who loses a house the opportunity to build it back without having to conform to the new zoning.
We do have an ordinance on the books for single-family homes where we did it for 25-foot lots over in Silver Lake. You could use something like that, a similar type of ordinance. So if there's some regulation.
Yeah, that talks about the house existing on it, they
Where
can build.
there was a pre-existing house. Yeah. So something modeled after that, except for two-family. The only problem I have with the 50 dwelling units, other than what was mentioned, would be the parking. Because it is a problem now, we know that. I don't believe the concept of shared parking really would work in Washington area. Because what do you do on weekends? The residents are home and the businesses are still open. Earlier, I think you just made a little error. You said a minimum height of 14 foot on the ground, I think you meant maximum.
Maximum. Sorry, thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, doubling the zoning permit fees. I can see raising them if you wish, but I don't know about doubling. That's quite a significant increase, 10%. That's it. Thank you. Oh, sure.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address.
Toledo Jerry Delgertia, 8 Grove Street in Belleville, also the chairman of the zoning board. There is another things I want to mention on this. First one, about the rezoning of Washington Avenue, I agree with it 1,000%. I think all Washington Avenue should be the same zone. I've been saying that for years. I don't know if it was 10 years ago, at one time it was all the same zone. And all of a sudden everything changed, and now it looks like a tic-tac-toe zone. Every couple of blocks it changes. It's a joke. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. There was a recommendation at the, originally, and then last meeting, some people brought it up from the board, and it was taken off. And that was changing a pool from 4 feet back to 3. It originally was 3, and I think it should go back to 3, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I asked Mr. DiLorenzo, and he can testify, when did this ever change to 4? Because as long as I knew it, it was 3. And he said about 10 years ago, when they did the last master plan, it got changed to 4, and you know why it got changed to 4. And I don't know why it got changed to 4, but what you've resulted in doing, if you keep it at 4, is everybody who put a pool before 10 years ago, when they go to get a, yes, there's going to be a problem. So my suggestion is change it back to the 3, because it's only been 4 for 10 years. Before then, it was always 3. Now, as for the flooding thing, 1 foot ain't going to make a difference if the pool breaks. Trust me, it will not make a difference. So I would suggest that that be added back in. The next question I have, and I have this question for the gentleman. The block 5401, lot 4, where did you get the idea of changing the zone from? From one family to multi-family. I'd like to know where you got this idea.
This is the parcel we were talking about
That's,
earlier.
we're talking about 18 Princeton Terrace.
Princeton Terrace.
Only because it's surrounded by, I mean, it's a big parcel for
Oh, I know
that
it's a big
area.
parcel.
So it seemed then there's an adjacent zone.
Well, were you aware that it came before the zoning board? I think at least 2 decades ago. I don't know if Mr. Kennedy was on the board at the time. Came before zoning. Trust me, it came before zoning.
Why don't you find it out?
This is
Yeah, we
right.
will.
No,
We're planning.
it did
I
one
know.
time. it
Two
came-
times it came?
No, it came for houses for planning, and then zoning, I think, years ago, maybe 30, 40 years ago.
Well, it was all when I was on, and I haven't been on 30 years. But I've been on a good 2 decades ago. It came before us, and it was knocked down because our water and main lines go through there. And it's a right-of-way they can't be built on. Now, if you change this to multifamily, you will allow 13 units there. What I have no problem is changing it to a 2-family zone for one reason. There's already a 2-family house on the zone, so that would be proper. And I believe if they subdivide it without having a problem with those water mains, because they're all on one side, but they take up a good portion of the lot, you could possibly make maybe 1 or 2 more 2-families there without having a problem. But multifamily, no, I don't think that would be a good idea at all. Because there's a large portion of the lot that handles water and gas mains. And we all know what happened when a gas main broke one time. Well, I forgot where it was, down in yes, in Edison. So I wouldn't like that to happen. And that was the reason the zoning board knocked it down. That was the main reason it knocked it down. Okay, now there's another thing here. Are you in favor of making, especially industrial zones in our town, making it a industrial, commercial, mixed use? Because a lot of industrial, where there's warehousing and stuff, they also like to sell to the public.
You mean retail, you mean retail.
Retail, whatever, retail. Well, what's the difference between commercial and retail? I get confused.
You can have commercial and retail, you have to spell it out.
All right, then industrial retail.
Industrial retail?
In other words, but they could also sell to the public.
What are the codes?
It's like a mixed use.
Yeah, like a mixed use, exactly.
In an industrial, what is primarily an industrial zone?
Yes.
So he wants some probably commercial uses in the industrial zone too. That's what he's talking about.
Because I think that would be favorable for business and industrial, warehousing, whatever. You have a thing on here, where is this? Yes. Okay, establish standards permitting a maximum of 3 uses for a single property within an existing commercial and industrial zone. But you don't mention the mixed-use zones where this primarily happens. I'll give you an example. We had one on Washington Avenue. They put the pizzeria. They had the apartments upstairs. They had to come back for a flower shop right next door. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the same building with the same uses.
Well, that is the same building.
No, I know, but not, you know, he's talking about the same use, I guess, industrial or warehouse.
Well, I think it should be added to the retail, residential mixed use. And
You want a
the BG.
combination, you want a
Yeah, combination, so they don't have to come before us every time they have some other thing they want to put in.
Minor thing.
Minor thing, exactly. It's not right to the applicant. I mean, and it makes things easier for me because I have less cases. Now, this part that you were complaining about, everybody was complaining about this bathroom business, okay? I think the key word here, and you said 1 additional room, but you got left out the part about 1 additional room greater than 70 square feet. I think that's where the problem is, because under our ordinance, 70 square feet is the minimum needed to be considered a bedroom. So if you can't have a bedroom then down there.
Well, to consider a dwelling, you're gonna have to have everything. You have to have the bathroom, the bedroom, you know, and the kitchen.
So you're saying you have the bathroom as long as there's no kitchen?
Well, that doesn't define a dwelling, you know,
Exactly.
in our ordinance, unless you change.
So you're saying that wouldn't cause a problem for basement apartments, is what you're saying?
It could potentially, but, you know, it could, like, if somebody has a bathroom right now in their house, they came in for a permit to do something else, and we see down there, they didn't have a permit for the bathroom, and they said, oh, we got it there 50 years, they gotta get a permit, and they would never get that if you say that they can't have a bathroom in the basement.
Oh, okay, so you
Follow
want to
me?
do that,
Yeah,
so there's no problem?
because that's what happens, you run into those problems.
All right, so then I have no problem with it then. I have no problem. As long as it doesn't push on to that. Can I ask you a question? Isn't it usually the council's job to ask for an area in need of redevelopment? Why would you be pushing areas in need of redevelopment?
I'll defer to our
It
attorney.
guides the governing body and the planning board in where areas of need redevelopment should be considered. But there's a whole separate statute which governs when and how.
Now, areas in need of redevelopment, now, I might be wrong on this, but I want you to clarify. Wasn't that originally considered blighted areas? And then they changed it to make it sound more politically correct?
Correct. Essentially.
So technically,
Well,
when
to
anything
clarify the answer, that there's criteria in the local redevelopment and housing law which property has to satisfy in order to be declared an area in redevelopment. If you call it blight, then that's just another name for an area. Underutilized properties, vacant land, dilapidated buildings.
Now traditionally, and I don't think you're a real estate expert, neither am I, but I've been familiar with areas that were declared blighted. When an area is declared blighted, usually it drops the property value. And you're proposing in here to put one on one of the highest property value sections in the town, which is the Belleville-Nutley border.
Well, I can tell you, I'm a redevelopment attorney. I represent the town of Morristown, the town of Nutley, Aon, and we do a lot of planning board work on the town side. And I can tell you, your statement that a designation area can be developed.
As blighted, I said.
Well, I don't know what that means.
Well, now they don't call it blighted, now they call it that.
Well, I can tell you what the statute says today, which I just cited for you, and that there's criteria in the local redevelopment housing law which a property needs to satisfy in order for the governing body to make that declaration.
Well, why would you bring this up specifically? You have specifically 3 lots brought up here. Why?
Because area needed redevelopment is a zoning change. Essentially, establish a redevelopment plan, which you hear tonight about Belmont Avenue. It establishes a...
I'm not talking about Belmont.
No, I'm using
I'm
that
talking
as...
about the north, well,
I'm
because
talking
I'm
about that
more concerned about that section. That, the Belmont Avenue area might come under that criteria to a degree. Okay, I'm not gonna argue that point. But you're talking about the Belleville-Nutley border. That's what I'm talking
Okay,
about.
let's take that for an example.
Go ahead.
In order for that to be, again, this is just what I said at the outset. This is just a guide. This doesn't establish new zones. This doesn't establish...
It's making a recommendation.
Whether the council follows that, or whether they go forward with a...
Why would you even bring it up? That's my issue.
Because the planner has studied it and said...
Good. Planner, stop throwing it to him. Why did you bring up those 3 lots?
Which 3 lots again? Show me
Which 3
ones.
lots? Okay,
Show
let
me
me
on the
find
map.
it. It's right here. It's the Belleville-Nutley line on Franklin Ave.
Frank?
Belleville-Nutley line on Franklin Ave.
By Hilton Street, right there?
Yes,
Going by
yes,
Hilton.
exactly, right there.
Just north of the high tension wire.
Right. Oh, good example. I like that.
I think you're on a cruise, Joe.
Yeah, but I came back just for this.
In discussions with city personnel, it was decided that this would be an area that should be considered.
What city personnel?
When we do our research, we talk to Frank, we talk to planning board members, we listen to the public.
You didn't talk to zoning board members?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't write the plan either.
Well, my point is, why is this looking to be made an area in need of
It's
redevelopment?
looking to be considered. I'm not saying to do it. You can, did you want to say anything, Melanie?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just bringing up the same point, that in this study, we are just recommending it to be seen. I mean, we're not saying that it should be declared an area in need, because that's
Well,
not...
why do you even recommend it? Where did this idea come into your head? You're saying it came from the town.
Mr. Chairman, I can give a little local knowledge on this,
Go ahead.
because this is right on the...
This is where the big Statue of Liberty used to be on the other side. I remember that. Let's go back that long.
Let's go north of the high tension wires.
Go ahead.
There is a house there that is under contract that really should be demolished. It's a white home, 1 family.
Okay. Is that the one between the gas station and the high tension wire?
Yes, and then
On
there is
Franklin Ave.
then there's a little shack from the White House to the auto repair shop that also probably should be knocked down. or
Okay.
retired. And then that auto repair shop has been going under a very prolonged environmental cleanup
Because of the old gasoline tank.
because of the gasoline tank. So you've got some very old housing inventory to be kind.
So why don't you just let it come before the zoning board if they want to go over the laws of the zoning?
That's...
This is the bypass zoning laws. I hate bypassing, that's why you make zoning laws, not to be bypassed.
If I could just add,
Go ahead, Ed.
And that's only by way of local knowledge. That's not giving an
the
opinion
purpose,
on...
the purpose of the zoning plan is, you know, that your board is a quasi-judicial board. You
Yes.
should basically change the ordinance, unlike the planning board, which really is fine.
Well, we don't really change the order, we adjust it
Okay.
per property.
Fair enough. But the idea of master plan, which is up to date and why the law requires it, this process, by the way, I don't know what was mentioned earlier, the law requires that the municipality do this every 10 years, so.
Oh, I know that.
Okay, that's why we're here. So, this is to really just to guide and allow the governing body to establish ordinances which don't require the zoning board of adjustment to make decisions on each parcel by parcel based on the criteria.
Well, let me ask you something. Since you got into all this and you want to get into this, no, we can get into it. Those 3 lots that we're talking about, they could do a reverse subdivision, correct?
I'm sure you mean consolidate.
Yes.
Correct. They could.
And then they could build something which is within the zoning law. And if they don't want to build something within the zoning law, then only they would have to come before the zoning board. Am I correct?
So,
And the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, we.
Thank you, I'm just thinking a straight answer.
We can go through hypotheticals, but the idea is,
But if they go to an area needing redevelopment, they can bypass the zoning laws, can't they?
I don't know, when you say the zoning law.
Because when you do an area in need of redevelopment, you don't go by the zoning laws, you go by a special plan, a special development plan. Am I right, or I might as well ask you, because you come out with straight answers?
I said it earlier, a redevelopment plan is the equivalent of a zoning law.
A zoning ordinance, a special zoning ordinance.
No, it's.
That it can have anything in it that it wants, as long as the planning board agrees and the council agrees. Am I correct? So the current zoning laws can be bypassed, can't they? Or they are bypassed, because you're making a special zone and you decide what makes up that zone.
In some cases, it's an overlay zone where the underlying zoning stays in place,
Go ahead.
where the redevelopment plan would also be in effect, or it completely supersedes the older zoning. So it could go both. You're right in one instance, depending on what the plan says, and then you're not correct in the sense.
It depends on how they want to do it.
Okay,
Right.
so you made your point.
I did make my point.
Okay, so come on, Jerry, not all night on.
I know you want to go home. I know you want to go home.
I don't want to go home, but what are we going to talk, 2 hours on 3 pieces
No,
of
but we have to get
property?
things straight. We have to get things straight, that's all I'm saying. But I think that there should be 3 uses in a retail residential zone.
Combination.
Yeah, combination, exactly, because you end up, like, you'll have a property, there's apartments upstairs, there's 2 stores downstairs. Why should you have to come back before the zoning board because somebody puts one thing in one store and somebody puts something else in the other store? It's ridiculous. That's all I'm
Right
saying.
there.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you.
No, Kevin's happy.
Anybody else in the public have a question? I do.
Please state your name and address.
Jeff Mattingham, 56 Walnut Street. Mr. Mizell, are you familiar with Mazer? Also a home.
Mine when they made this map, back in 2013, yes.
Okay, very good. So that was my point. 3 to 4 years ago, I believe the council requisitioned a Mazer report, which was, I believe, codicil to, excuse me, the fair share housing that we were considering, implementing in Belleville. In that report, Mazer stated that Belleville was 3.4 square miles. Is that correct? Within your calculations?
2.2, 2.4, it's one of the, somewhere in there.
So that right in around it,
Yeah.
3.4. The county property that lies within the borders of Belleville, that you have now mentioned several times, has open space, but you're seeking to count it as open space. That's 1.1, according to Mazer, square miles. That leaves 2.3, I'm sorry, 3.3 square miles. Is that what it is? 3.4 minus 1.1, I'm sorry, 2.3 square miles. What is our present population in Belleville?
It's right around 35,000 people. I mentioned the number earlier, 36,203 as of 2016.
So basically, we have 36,000 people, plus or minus a few hundred one way or another, in 2.3 square miles. And you're proposing possibly a whole lot more residential development in 50 units per acre, correct?
That is correct.
So we're talking about open space. I happen to live 2 blocks on Walnut from the Belleville Park, which is a county park. You're continually reference that as potentially being open space. Do you know what the size of Hendricks Field is, which is the other? There's Belleville Park, County Park, and Hendricks Golf Course, Hendricks Field.
which is a lion's share of that parcel of property, it is not accessible to Belleville residents. It's a, it's a paid-for golf course. County golf course, correct. And you pay and you bring your clubs and you play golf. It's not a recreation zone where people can park their car, go in and play frisbee, walk the dog, do whatever. It is not for that purpose. Now, as I said, I live 2 blocks from that park, Belleville Park. In the summertime, they're parking on the lawns because people from all over the county come to use that park because it is a county park. Belleville people do also use it, but in order with the multiple baseball fields, soccer fields, things like that, it is well used, overused. It's very, very heavily used in the summertime in particular. And the fact is that Belleville does not have easy access to utilize that park during the peak summer hours because it's so heavily utilized all over by people from all over the county. So, I mean, is it fair to actually consider the county property where Hendricks Field Golf Course is the lion's share of that property, and then the actual Belleville Park not being Belleville? Belleville does not own the park. It's not for Belleville people, other than the fact that we're as county residents, and we can get there and get time to utilize it. So is that a fair thing to do, to try to consider that as Belleville open space, and when, so little of it?
Keep in mind, this is simply a zoning classification. That's what we're doing. We're classifying this, trying to classify it correctly as open space. Beyond that, there is a portion of the plan that talks about there is still the need for more open space, more recreational opportunities for the residents. But quantifying it in terms of numbers. But again, from a zoning perspective, the open space zone, I think, has a reason for being created. It doesn't remedy the fact that there's still a shortage of open space, as we've heard discussed this evening.
Well, that's a big point of mine. I mean, with the potential addition for more residential, when we have so little property now, 2.3 square miles, 36,000 people. I mean, that's a tremendous density.
Mr. Mattingly, may I help you? Because we're trying to get recommendations from the public. Is it fair to say that you are not in favor of the proposed density on Washington Avenue?
Not in particular on Washington Avenue.
Anywhere?
But other zones.
Anywhere?
No. I'm okay with it in some places, particularly on Washington Avenue.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I do believe that you have added that residential component on substantial portions of the easterly property in Belleville, which borders the river, Route 21. Correct. I mean, I see that, is that the purple, is that the inclusion? How much of that potentially is flood zone? I mean, let's first talk about the fact that the Passaic River is tidal in Belleville. When the tide goes up, the river goes up. Any excessive amounts of rain flow, from the nature, coming into our county, everything on this side of the Watchung Mountains is coming to this river. It's headed here. Our manholes now are blow-off covers, and the river floods onto Main Street at every high tide. In some cases, it comes back in, and it floods again. The police have to go out and lay out cones, and directing traffic away, not a through area any longer, because it's flooding in different areas. Why would we be putting residential in traditionally industrial zones that potentially strand people into, unable to get out of that area?
I would say that you're not going to approve anything that doesn't have an engineering solution to that issue, in terms of building a structure that they can't imagine they're going to allow building in a flood zone or plain, but there are engineering solutions to the situation that you're talking about.
Well, I'd just like to explore that a little bit. The challenges are tremendous. We have very few streets that go east-west, out, bless you, yeah, out of the valley. So a lot of that property does not have easy access out of that area. It's stuck in that area. Once again, industrial property traditionally, when it floods, it's a terrible thing. People can't go to work, they're, stuck. Now, if it's residential, what are we going to do? Where are we going to put them? How are we going to get them out of there? I mean, flood zone, there really are major areas that you cannot simply get from Dudley through Belleville when the river road is flooded, which is Main Street.
Mr. Mattingly, I don't think any of this redevelopment master plan would change us so we can build in a flood zone. That's not the purpose, that's not what it will do. So, I mean, it's just,
It's the addition of potential.
we're not going to allow building in a flood zone. It's not going to allow that.
Well, it's including it as a viable zone now for developers.
If it's a flood zone, I don't think we're going to be allowed to build there.
Several of those properties flood, and they become divided.
Lorenzo, could you elaborate a little bit on that?
I don't know which property he's talking about. He's
Well, I
talking
mean, looks
about
like
on Main
Kitty-
Street?
yeah.
You're talking about Thicket Street property.
You can start with that, yeah.
So he's talking about down on Main Street, more, not on Washington Avenue. I don't know if the zone's changing down there. John, the zone's changing down there? Only the Thicket Street property? So redevelopment? Yeah, he's asking for a redevelopment. He's asking for a redevelopment. That's what
Could
he's
that
talking about.
potentially include, 50 units per acre?
It could, or it could just be industrial, whatever the planning board council wants to do.
Well, I'm all for the industrial.
Yeah.
I mean, these are rateables that don't cost us money. When you're talking residential, this requires services and.
On that big piece of property.
Yeah, major, 23.7 acres. Yeah, it's a major big piece of property, 10 miles from New York City.
In my comments, I did recommend that area needs further study so you can decide what would best go there. I don't think simply saying industrial should go there is necessarily the best thing, but I think it certainly needs to be looked at more closely. I could not come up with a zoning classification that I felt was appropriate all by myself. It needs further investigation.
That is, it's a difficult piece of property, and it's massive. 23.7 acres is huge. So whatever we put there is very important. The basement apartments, most basement apartments, right now Belleville, it's choked. We don't have any, it's become really challenging parking on a weekend in Belleville. And multiple areas of the town have now just choked up. But we really do not need more.
Mr. Mattingly, if I could just jump in. The intent of it was not to expand the use of basement apartments, it was to limit it. So we are going to take the recommendations from the public and we're going to readdress these issues. But that was not the intent. And maybe we'll have to clarify the wording, but I want you to know that wasn't the planners or the planning board's intent to allow more basements. It was the opposite. So we are going to consider the public's comments and readdress it, but before you elaborate on it, I just wanted to let you know that wasn't the intent, and we may have to clarify the wording to spell that out a little more clearly. But that's...
Well, I find it very troubling that potentially now we're including a lot of potential residential development in the flood zone, in the eastern, traditionally industrial area of Belleville, where, and like the Kitty property is, there's high tension wires that traverse over the top of it. I watch the helicopters now, they maintain the wires. And nobody climbs those towers anymore, it's all done by helicopter. And so potentially whatever we put there, that's going to be a big issue. There's high pressure gas underneath those high tension wires. So this is sensitive infrastructure as we're talking about it in the other zone, where you have, you're talking about, the area around School 7, I forget, the two families become multi-families. There's infrastructure all over and along, I guess that there's an easement that goes on the ridge along where it crosses Tualatin, yes, onto the reservoir property. There's infrastructure all over the place, gas, water, electric, and big things. So the idea that we're going to continue to add residential to a town is choked up. I mean, like Councilman Kennedy said, 3 lights to get to, Union on Belleville Avenue. I mean, it's gotten to the point where really we cannot support, our infrastructure can't support the 36,000 that we have now. How can we possibly consider adding more residential on, where areas are all so dense now? And I'm not talking about Nutley border or things like that, where you have a little bit of room, it's, when you get into the center of town and in and around Belleville Avenue to Geralman, I mean, 2 streets, anything happens there, this town is choked. When any work that goes on in those areas, there's not enough east-west traverses through the town. So it's, and when you consider the flooding along the river, which happens regularly, this is not, once in a great while, the 100-year floodplain has become every 10 years. We're getting these massive floods that happen almost regularly. So it seems like we have to be very careful with what we consider. I love the idea of including commercial to the industrial and having that ability to, if you can supply the parking and whatever is needed when I know, it's a long way from industrial to commercial. But when it can be incorporated, that business supplies those ratables that we desperately need. It doesn't further burden and tax our services, our schools. We need to increase more services, police, fire, DPW, pickups, garbage, recycling. All these things cost us money, the taxpayers. So please, let's be very careful as a board, considering what we're going to open up here to potential to developers who, once you incorporate it into your master plan, you can be basically held hostage by your own plan. So they can sue you and hold you accountable to what it is that they'd like to do on that property when you include these zones that now are very liberal in terms of, adding potential residential all over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackey. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break. For comments at this time? If not, at this time, we're going to close the public portion. And I think after hearing the public's comments, we're going to take into consideration some of the points that were brought up. We're going to take it back to our subcommittee and take these recommendations into consideration.
Very good.
I don't think I would put you under pressure on this
We don't know if it'll be done by next month's meeting, so we want to hold ourselves to a date. So sometime in the near future, we'll have new notices sent out for the master plan.
Thank you.
And now under new business, we'd like to bring up the Belmont Avenue redevelopment plan.
Again, just for the record, I'll be brief. My name again is Dean Donatelli. I serve as Special Redevelopment Counsel for the township. As you know, this is the Belmont Avenue redevelopment plan. It's been declared an area needed redevelopment by the governing body. And the next step after that designation is to establish a redevelopment plan which will serve as an ordinance, essentially a zoning ordinance for development property. It has been introduced by the governing body, the redevelopment plan has, and the law requires that it then be referred to this board for consistency review with the master plan. It's not a public hearing. It is a referral function, so the board and its planner will review the plan and make a determination and send the referral back to the governing body. I have reviewed it for legal form and process, and it complies with the local redevelopment and housing law.
You're satisfied, counsel?
I am, yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yes.
So that's going to be done by the second reading when we have it, before the second reading?
Pardon me?
No, I'm party. Is that gonna be done before the second reading?
Is what going to be done?
The plan for Belmont Avenue.
The plan has been drafted,
We introduced an ordinance.
and with a plan attached to it.
Well, I didn't see no plan attached to it, I just saw the ordinance. But that'll all be done by second reading.
The second reading will be
comes
at the first meeting in January, which I think is
Right, January 7th or something.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, everything it'll be adopted on that, at that point, which.
Oh, we don't know if it'll be adopted.
Well, we don't know,
But
it would be adopted.
It'll be heard.
Correct, thank you, Councilman.
If you're gonna swear you again, since this is a new matter.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please state your name.
Donald Mizell, M-E-I-S-E-L. I'm a professional planner with the firm of CME and Associates. Everyone here is familiar with the site. I do have a graphic that I can show you. Again, we refer to it many times as the former Pathmark site. It's approximately 9.5 acres and is actually bordered by 2 light rail stations, one of which is located in Bloomfield, and the other is located in Silver Lake. What is proposed for that 9.5 acres is essentially a transit village of sorts. I've talked with many experts about this because it is a very unique situation to have a development around a light rail station, and in this case, 2. But what you need to know, and it was mentioned previously, there are 15,000 people living within a mile radius of this location. 15,000 already, so that is a lot of people. I think what most people are interested in are the bulk standards of what would be permitted in this zone. So there are quite a few uses that are proposed as permitted. Multifamily dwellings, neighborhood retail businesses including supermarkets, neighborhood business services, retail businesses, all of these are very general. Office businesses including professional offices, banks, eating establishments where we include restaurant, fast food, luncheonette, or sidewalk cafe, fitness clubs, child and adult care facilities, and mixed uses of all of the above. Some of the permitted accessory uses associated with any of those would be off-street parking, community and recreation rooms, rooftop amenity spaces. What you have in a lot of developments now is where they're mandated to have open space, they will often put things on roofs. You'll take rooftop garden, croquet, golf, look around. Certainly, if you go up 4 stories at that particular location, you'll have a lot of nice views of the surrounding area. Fences, trash enclosure signs, things like that. What's important to know is there are landscape criteria, design criteria, and the key bulk criteria. What is proposed is a maximum height of 5 stories and a maximum height of 65 feet. Maximum lot coverage, this is total, building and your impervious surfaces cannot exceed 80% of the lot, which in an urban area is very good. It's going to be a challenging standard for them to meet, but I think that it's only fair, especially with all our talk of open space, to not create any more impervious surface than we have to. The caveat there is if they create a green roof, there are techniques that they can use to help with stormwater runoff, that if they can incorporate them into their plan or their project and demonstrate to you that it's a betterment, you can cut them some slack on the 80% criteria. Residential use is proposed. The maximum would be 25 units per acre. We've heard 50, 50, 50 all night. In my opinion, 25 would be the maximum that you would want on this site. It's a 9.5 acre site. If you do the math like I did, that would be a maximum of 237 units possible. Again, the maximum. So again, that is what is proposed. The makeup of structures, if you're familiar with the concept of micro units, there was an article in the New York Times. Boy, and I feel old when I say that because all my old friends used to use that phrase, but there's the concept of a micro unit. A micro unit is smaller than a studio apartment. So you're talking about a space between 350 to 400 square feet, bedroom, Murphy beds, small kitchen area, designed for people who come and go into the city and work. Up to 15% of the units that would be allowed could be that small. Up to 15% of units could be studio apartments, which would be a minimum size of 450 square feet. 40 to 60% could be 650 square feet or one bedroom. And the maximum number of two-bedroom units, which would have to be a minimum of 850 square feet, is 40%. So the reason for that flexibility is to give the developer the option to design a project that he thinks will work for this site. But the unique concept is the micro unit. That's small, and we're not used to seeing structures that small being built. The parking requirements are fairly, I guess they're liberal or stringent, however you look, but basically 0.75 spaces per unit. So again, using that 237 number, you multiply that by 0.75, that's the number of spaces that would have to be provided for this project. The reason it's not one or two as it is citywide is because you do have the light rail stations there. There's a provision for shared spaces when the day comes where people do share zip cars more frequently than they do now. There's a provision to allow for that. If there is a non-residential use, so commercial, retail, office, the requirement for parking is one space for every 400 square feet, fairly reasonable. And again, the signage is important, and the signage standard, or the signage bulk standard, is about 3 pages long. So they're very specific. They're not intended to be very tasteful. They are intended to be tasteful and not the area will not be overpopulated with signage, let's put it that way. I think what is important is there are mandatory design standards in here. Again, the language is general, but there are very specifics about what can be done and what can't be done. And again, it's holding a developer to a higher standard than currently is allowed with the zoning that's across the city. We've also incorporated sustainable design and energy efficiency standards for them to abide by. We don't mandate that they meet a certain certification, but we do mandate that they identify every energy efficient practice that they put on the site. So if they're using green roofs, if they're using low flow toilets, if they're using all of super electric low energy lighting, if they are putting solar arrays, they're supposed to list that, tell you all of the environmentally correct things that they're doing, and then we hold them to those criteria. What this does from a planning perspective, it does follow the principles of transit-oriented development, which is, again, highly concentrated populations around a transportation system. In this case, it's light rail. I did not feel comfortable going higher than 25 units per acre on this site, again, because it's already heavily populated. The neighborhood is going to have to adjust to this, but I do think it is a number that works for this particular site. And again, you've heard me long enough that when we talk about smart growth simply means good planning. And the good planning is being done, has been done, and it's in your hands to make sure that this proceeds in a fashion that sticks with this plan, which again is holding the developer, in my opinion, to a very high standard, much higher than other plans that I have seen. Affordable housing requirements, I want to make it very clear that in this type of situation, you have the developer, the owner of the property, enters into a redeveloper agreement with the city. And in that agreement, they will address their affordable housing obligation. We don't make them do it as part of this plan. It's a separate issue that has to be dealt with by council, unless you decide to make it an issue. But we are not imposing a requirement for affordable units, and we leave that to the redeveloper agreement. There's a section in here what has to happen for planning board review. Basically, you've been through this before. You get the plan, you have the plan in front of you now. Council has already looked at this plan. They're looking to you for recommendations prior to their voting on it a second time in January. So, and this actually, what would happen is this zone becomes its own zone. So the area in red becomes designated on your official zoning map as the Belmont Avenue redevelopment area.
The specific question asked to the board tonight is that the ordinance, which went through a first reading,
Correct.
is consistent with what you just discussed.
And I would summarize by saying, again, smart growth principles and transit-oriented development, which is in the master plan. I'm very much in favor of it, that it does meet those criteria.
And that it is consistent.
It is very consistent.
That's the narrow question. You want to hear from council again, you can.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, just it's it would be the decision of the board based on the recommendation of your planner to make a recommendation via a resolution to the governing body, indicating, as Mr. DiBiase said, that the proposed redevelopment plan is consistent with the terms of the master plan. Thank you very much.
Would someone like to make a motion that we do find the recommendations consistent with the master plan?
I'll make it.
Someone like to second it? Second. Vote. Tom will second it. Any discussion? Lois, call the roll, please.
Mr. Venero,
Yes.
Councilman Kennedy,
I abstain because it's going to come back in front of the council.
Andrew Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
No.
Mr. Corvo,
Not gonna, since I haven't, this is my first meeting, I'm gonna abstain, Randy.
Mr. Bove,
Yes.
Mr. Sanabria,
Yes.
Ms. Rico.
Yes.
All right, council. We'll have our secretary pass it up, but you can certainly report to the council.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to leave it this time. I have something else to do.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Everybody have a good Christmas and a good, safe New Year.
We have an application before the board. It's PB 2017-08, 59-65 Janarone Street, a minor subdivision with 3 lots to construct a 2-family dwelling.
Mr. Chair, just have 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
What's the next
It's over 100 no contract, official yet doing due diligence, but I do have.
Something like that. It's a 2-family zone.
Front yard?
See you guys later. Safety subdivision. Yes, yeah.
Special circumstances, maybe Frank.
Yeah, that would be, that would be fine. 7 o'clock. By the way, I heard what happened.
Did Dean leave?
Dean?
Well, I want to congratulate you. Did a good job.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, council's name is Robert Gassion, the firm is Gassion, Mako 524 Union Avenue in Belleville. I represent the applicant in this matter to Mako Industries INC. My client is the owner of 59-65 General Street, which is property of General Park. Forgive me, I was out at a social gathering last night. My client is seeking to subdivide the property into 3 two-family lots. We're also seeking bulk relief as to one of the lots. The property is an RV zone where 2 families are permitted. The property is the site of a former factory which is long ago demolished and the property is currently vacant. 11.03, which is the lot that is on the corner of Generone and Park, is the one that will require bulk relief. What happens is the lot narrows down as you go towards Generone and it gets to 91.1 rather than 100 feet. And because it's a corner lot, you have a situation where you have to have 2 equal setbacks of 20 feet rather than side yards, so there's a violation along Generone Street. So there's 2 bulk variances with regard to only one of the lots. All lots are far more than 5,000 square feet. It's just the unique shape of the lot, the rear line, that creates the variance and on the corner. You'll hear from the experts that the setback on General Street, the other houses, is not 20 feet or anything close to 20 feet, and this setback on General will be consistent. The witnesses you'll hear from are Pam Needlecoff of Mako and Anthony Marucci, the engineer and planner. Mrs. Needlecoff will discuss her ownership and what it is she's seeking approval to do. Mr. Marucci will describe the subdivision and discuss the reasons that justify the approval of the 2 bulk variances. I'd like to call my witness, Ms. Pam Needlecoff.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
Pamela Nettlecoff.
And
Yes, please.
spell it.
N-U-D-E-L-K-O-W-N.
What's your occupation, Ms. Needlecoff?
I'm a chef consultant.
And what is your home address?
2157 Jordan Court, Mahwah, New Jersey.
Are you the president of the Mako Industries INC?
Yes, I am.
And does the Mako own the property at the corner of Park and Generone Street?
Yes, it does.
And how long have you owned that property?
My father worked for Walters in the 1950s, and then he purchased the property from Walters, which was doing the same metal processing in 1970.
And Wolfers was the factory located on the property that we're talking about.
Yes.
And how did he acquire the property?
He bought the business and the property from Mr. Walters.
And were there environmental issues that have been cleaned up?
Yes,
And do you have an RAO with regard to this property?
yes, we do.
And what is it you're seeking approval to do?
We're seeking approval to get the current lot divided into 3 lots for 2-family homes.
And if this is approved, you plan to sell this property to a developer?
Yes, we do.
And do you actually have a contingent contract in place at this time?
Yes, we do.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman, this witness.
Sorry.
Does anyone want to?
No, I understand. Versus like, yeah.
Mr. Marucci.
Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and spell your last.
Anthony Marucci, M-A-R-U-C-C-I.
Thank you.
Mr. Marucci, your business address,
116 Whippany Road, Whippany, New Jersey.
your occupation,
I'm a licensed professional engineer, land surveyor, professional planner in the state of New Jersey.
would you give the board the benefit of some of your experience in this field?
Mr. Gassion, he's appeared before us a number of times. We accept him as an expert.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So he's accepted as an expert in the field of engineering and planning.
Yes, he is.
Thank you. Did you prepare the subdivision plan?
Yes, sir.
And would you just review the location of the property?
May I
Certainly.
submit these photographs that I'd like to use in my presentation? The reason I like to do that first, because as I discuss the application, I'll be talking about photographs. There are 4 photographs stapled together in sets.
Bob, you want to mark this?
Yeah, I'm going to mark this as A1. A1, a series of 4 photographs that my witness will review. You go check your fish traps. Yeah, would you give one for the chairman? You got my left?
I do.
So what I had asked you was to review the location of the property. And you've got a series of photographs that we've just marked into evidence as A1. Please go ahead with that review, using those photographs to assist you.
The purpose of the photographs, as I go into my testimony, is to show the board what is on the site presently. Photograph number 1 shows a fenced-in area, which is a vacant lot, as was explained by the applicant. Photograph number 2 is to show the board the type of housing, the newer housing that's on Generone Street, right opposite our property. Photograph number 3 shows the newer housing that's on Park Street, and adjacent to us, 2 doors away from us. And photograph number 3 is to show, it shows the newer housing that's on Emmett Street, which is right opposite Park Street, just to give the board an idea of the type of housing that's there with respect to 2-family houses, which this zone permits. And hopefully if the board approves this application, you'll have 3 new houses of similar type in the area.
And you said the housing that is permitted in this zone, this is what zone?
It's the RB zone, which permits 2-family houses on 5,000 square foot lots with 50-foot widths, lot widths.
And would you describe the existing site?
The existing site is on the corner of Generone Street and Park Street, and you can see it's kind of a trapezoidal shape where on the left side of the Park Street side, it's deeper, but on the Generone Street side, it's narrower in depth, which is only about 91 feet, 91.1 feet. That's both in the existing condition and also in the proposed condition. That's what creates one of the variances, which really is an existing condition in terms of the lot depth. Again, the property will be subdivided into 3 conforming lots in terms of area and lot width. The only variances that are being proposed is the corner lot, where that depth of 91 feet is an existing condition, also a proposed condition. But the only other variance would be the corner, because on a corner lot, you need 20-foot front yard setback on both lots, but we just don't have enough land not enough, because of the shape of the property, we don't have the 20 feet on the Generone side. With that being said, the house adjacent to our property, to the west of our property on the Jan Road side has a front yard setback of 9.5 feet, and we're going to be at 10.7. So we're in line with the house on Jan Road. Across the street, on the corner of Park and Jan Road, the existing house on the Park Street side only has a front yard setback of 2.2 feet. So we're consistent in terms of having the 20-foot on one corner but not on the other.
If you were to go up General Street towards Passaic Avenue, does it not remain consistent with regard to setbacks of a similar nature?
It does remain consistent.
And if you were to go across the street to 62 General Street, directly across, again, does it not have a similar
Yes, it
setback?
does.
Would you review the drainage on the site?
We do show topography on the existing condition, and the topography is such that it slopes from the north to the south towards Park Street. And it's a very gentle slope. It's the lot is fairly flat, but slopes towards Park Street.
And what changes, if any, would have to take place with regard to the drainage?
There will be minimal changes. Obviously, if the application is approved, a grading plan will be designed for each lot individually, and stormwater management will be created for each individual lot in terms of dry wells as required.
Is there any landscaping on the property, or is it really somewhat unsightly?
At the present time, there is no landscaping, it's just weeds, and it's just a vacant lot.
And would you review in detail the proposal, the subdivision proposal?
Well, again, the proposal is to create 3 lots, all of which would be conforming in terms of lot area and lot width. Lot 11.01 will have an area of 6,196 square feet and a 50-foot lot width. Lot 11.2 in the middle will have an area of 5,461 square feet with a 50-foot width. And lot 11.03, the corner lot, will have an area of 5,207 square feet with a lot width on Park Street of 58.6 feet in order to give it as much lot width as possible to create that corner, to give it some more space on the corner.
And would you review, you've discussed the variances, would you review them and discuss whether you're dealing with C1 or C2 or both of those?
In my opinion, we're actually dealing with both. The C1 criteria deals with the exceptional narrowness and shallowness and shape of a specific property. And we have that. We do have an unusual shape, the trapezoidal shape, the exceptional shallowness. So the 91-foot lot depth, in my opinion, comes under the C1 criteria. And we also have the C2 criteria, where the benefits outweigh the detriments. And with respect to the C2 criteria, we have to relate to a specific piece of property. And in my opinion, this is a specific piece of property in the sense that it's the largest parcel in that area. Right now, it's over 16,800 square feet. And so that makes it more than 3 times larger than what's permitted or required. So it is a specific piece of property. The second part is that purposes of municipal land use law need to be advanced by a deviation in the zoning ordinance requirement. And I believe that there are several purposes of municipal land use law that are promoted. Purpose A, obviously, is to guide the development of lands in a manner which will promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. That's the main purpose. So putting 3 new homes on this property will be in character with the neighborhood, as I showed you in those photographs. And obviously, that's better than having that empty lot with that fence surrounding it. So Purpose A is promoted. Purpose C is promoted, which provides adequate light, air, and open space. So we would, except for the corner lot, we meet all of the bulk and setback requirements so that we do provide adequate light, air, and open space. And Purpose I is to promote a desirable visual environment. Well, obviously, putting 3 homes in character with the area is better than having that vacant lot, so I believe that we do promote a desirable visual environment. The third part of the C2 criteria, can the variance be granted without substantial detriment to the public good? Well, in my opinion, there is no detriment because obviously having the 3 homes there is better than having that empty lot, as I stated before. The fourth part of the C2 criteria, the benefits of the deviation would substantially outweigh the detriment. And again, in my opinion, the benefits do substantially outweigh any detriment on the site. And the fifth part is that the variance will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. Well, the variance that we're requesting is minor. We're meeting the the RB bulk and setback requirements. So in my opinion, there is no impairment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance.
Are you also taking the former industrial site and converting it to a residential site, making it consistent with the zoning?
Absolutely, yes. You go from a non-conforming use to conforming uses.
I have no further questions in this one, Mr. Chairman. And I have no further witnesses.
Okay. Any board members have any questions?
Mr. Marucci, twice you said the lot was vacant and twice you said it was empty. What's the current use? I was there yesterday and there were cars parked on the lot itself.
Cars will park in there?
Yes.
I'll defer to the applicant. I surveyed the property. When I surveyed, there were no cars parked on the property.
There were yesterday. One didn't have any license plate and one did.
Well, I'll check on the one with the no license plate, but it's someone that used to work for us who's been keeping an eye on the property because we have a lot of dumping going on. Somebody was dumping old bicycles, they throw it over the fence. We've had a number of things.
I didn't see anybody there. It was just
He's-
3 cars.
He's there every day. I would have them take.
Any other members?
Parking, could you, even though if it's a 2-family house, what are the provisions of the house?
If you noticed in the photographs, the houses that are in that area have 2 parked garages and 2 parking spaces in front of the garages, so that's what you're required,
Okay.
yes.
Right.
Does anybody in the public have any questions or comments about this application? If not, would one of the members like to make...
I'd just like a brief summation, and I'll be very brief. Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is the site of a former factory. Coincidentally, I lived at 62 General Street. It was a big, not particularly attractive factory. It's been demolished, it's been cleaned up, it's ready to be useful in the town. It's still vacant and somewhat unsightly, as Mr. Walsh was pointing out, but 3 new 2-family homes will be a tremendous asset. It's a 2-family zone. We're looking to subdivide into 3 lots. 2 of the lots are completely compliant and far in excess of the area that would be required. The lot on the corner of Generone, because of the unique aspect that you have to have 2 front yards, that's the reason for the variance, but still, the setback from Generone is probably more generous than all the other old houses along Generone Street, including what I lived in directly across the street. Both the C1 and C2 criteria definitely apply. The C1 because of the unique shape of the property in that it starts at more than 130 feet down Park and narrows to about 90 or 91 feet at the corner of Generone. The C2, the biggest part of the C2 is you're eliminating what was a former industrial zone in a residential neighborhood. So you're making tremendous progress with regard to that. In addition, you're taking useless property and making it useful for the municipality. And I thank the board, as always, for their time and attention in listening to the case.
Thank you, Mr. Gassion.
I'll make the motion that based on the presentation and in compliance with the engineer's recommendation to Mr. Di Lorenzo's recommendation that I make the recommendation that we vote to approve.
Would like to second that one? Second. Lois, call the roll, please.
Conti seconded, right? Andy seconded, Andy seconded.
Mr. Vaquero,
Yes.
Mr. Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Corvo,
Yes.
Mr. Bove, Mr. Sanabria, Ms. Rico.
Yes.
Would someone like? Congratulations.
Motion to
Thank you.
adjourn.
Motion second the motion? Motion, the meeting is adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, we have to do the resolution. We have to do the resolution for the 7-Eleven. There was an issue that...
Oh, you want to open the meeting back up, or you need to open the meeting back up?
Yeah, please open the meeting back up.
I'll make a motion to reopen the meeting.
Thanks.
Second. Meeting is back open.
Thank you for something. Yeah, oh yeah, happy year. 20 years. Okay.
Thank you. Good luck seeing you.
Okay.
Thank you. I did. What color of money?
Yeah, the copy of the 7-Eleven
You're in an envelope.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gassion, could you also assist us on this? There's a couple of clarifications that I need, Mr. White. He's going to verbalize them now. It's okay.
Bob, the opening line under resolve, it says that we approve the demolition of an existing one-story masonry building. Was my recollection of also demolishing the two-family house?
Absolutely.
It says in a 2.5-story wood frame building.
You know, that was added, so maybe you have a copy without that added. Here, just coincidentally, you might not have.
You may not have gotten the second one.
They have 2.5-story wood frame buildings, so it's not going to mistake there.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you had the wrong, I mean, it's my office's fault, I'm sure. My apologies.
You didn't probably get the latest one, that's why.
Yeah.
As long as it was,
Yeah, that's in there.
was caught and I was in, this,
Mr. Walsh was on vacation, just got back.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
sorry about that.
and for, item number 4, I know the owner, I just want it on the record, but I know the owner agreed to coordinate the individual that are going to use for the driveway
Yes.
with the school.
Yes.
And that includes snow days, late openings, half sessions.
Whatever way you want to change it a little bit, that's satisfactory, but it was intended, I'm sure, there are not a lot of employees in a place like this. It's not like there's 10 employees, there's 2 or 3 employees. What they'll do, I suspect, is send one of the employees, try to have 3 probably at that time, and send an employee outside for that time when the school children will be walking by there.
Why don't we read the language into the record here? Number 4 is, the applicant shall provide an individual at the access driveway during times when school children are present. We kept it very broad, so we cover all situations, to ensure the safe utilization of the access driveway.
Just say the Belleville Avenue access.
Pardon?
Just say the Belleville Avenue access. That was the intent, right, at Belleville Avenue.
What?
No, that's what the Union.
I think it was Union Avenue.
Yeah, the kids walking down the street to school.
That was, I think that was, it was the mayor who brought it up, and I think he was just looking, he wasn't looking for any, he clearly said he wasn't looking for any law enforcement people.
Correct.
Just looking for somebody from within to watch what happened on Union Avenue.
And then the next condition we had, which goes to the children's safety, is the applicant shall post a sign reading, quote, caution, children crossing, unquote, at the access driveway.
Both satisfactory.
Mr. Walsh, is that okay? Okay with the answer?
That covers the Union Avenue as well as the Belmont Avenue access.
Belleville.
Belleville.
Yep. Or you could call this now. Well, just call it to approve the memorialization.
Motion for memorializing, 216 Belleville Avenue.
216 Belleville Avenue.
For memorializing, please call the roll.
Mr. Manero,
Yes.
Mr. Conti,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw,
Take no part.
Mr. Corvo,
Yes.
Mr. Bowe,
Yes.
Mr. Sanabria,
Yes.
Mrs. Rizzo.
Take no part.
Okay, Marlene, want to make a motion to adjourn again?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Well, one original is good for you.
Yes.
One, two.